Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast. My name is Chris.
And my name is James.
And we are the Formula One Bros.
Just two twins with a love of F1 to share our thoughts on everything in the world of Formula One.
And we are back after the 2023 Spanish Grand Prix, a Grand Prix which was dominated by Max Verstappen, which we'll get into a lot in greater detail. But it was also a Grand Prix that was very strategy driven. It was the first time all season that we had predicted tire strategies being a 2 or a 3 stop Grand Prix be the fastest way to do it, and not just a one stop. Completely contrasting what we had last week in Monaco. But to continue to set this up, we had a lot of things coming into this Grand Prix, so we're going to jump right in. The biggest thing is we had a lot of teams bringing upgrades to this Grand Prix.
Pretty
and that's
big
because
upgrades,
this is really the first of all, it's one of the first European Grand Prix that we've had, other than Baku. But it's a European Grand Prix. It's a naturally occurring road course. It's not a street course. And it's the track where Imola was supposed to be tipped as the first place that people were really going to bring a lot of upgrades. And unfortunately, the Grand Prix got canceled. So Spain was really the playground for a lot of teams bringing new upgrades. Most notably, Mercedes got to try out their package for the first time because they didn't really get to see it to its fullest potential in Monaco. And Ferrari brought a huge upgrade. And then smattering of other teams brought a couple smaller upgrades. Red Bull, McLaren, Aston Martin. So lots of upgrades. It was upgrades galore. So all in all, it was set up to be a really, really interesting Grand Prix. And I think the reason why it was set up that way is this track, the Spanish Grand Prix, this Catalunya circuit, is sort of a bellwether for how the rest of the season goes. Usually how the cars perform at this track tells us a little bit about how they're going to perform at each circuit. A little less so this year because of the change Sector 3, but usually that's how it was. And I think there are some really interesting trends with teams that I think we're going to get into a little bit.
Yeah. In my opinion, this race had the infrastructure in place to be an incredibly exciting race. Like you said, a lot of teams brought upgrades. Some brought pretty major upgrades. WAC qualifying. So some heavy-hitting drivers like Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez not making it into Q3. Even Charles getting knocked out into Q1. Lando Norris up into Q3, up into third place. Pierre Gasly was fourth. Alpines, both Alpines actually up into the, I believe both of them were in the top 5. By the Aston Martin struggled major. But it just, and it was predicted that it was going to rain. Not only the rain didn't ever happen, it just ended up being really, in my opinion, a pretty boring race. It had the makings of being a all-time classic, and it did not deliver on that, unfortunately.
Of course, when we say incredibly exciting Grand Prix, we always take it with a little bit of grain of salt because it is the Spanish Grand Prix. But I will say it was made more exciting because of the change in the third sector. No more chicane, no more piddling around there at 60, 70 miles an hour. Those two fast right-handers allowed the cars to stay really connected through the third sector. And actually, the DRS was super effective down the straightaway. We saw a lot of front stretch overtaking, particularly the moment between Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso. So I think that actually really, really helped out some of the racing, because usually, you get really close through the first and second sectors, lots of high speed and medium speed corners, and then the third sector just kind of breaks it all up. So by the time you get down to DRS, you're 7, 8, 9 tenths of a second behind, which is not enough to get up and make the overtake. But this was actually, it helped a lot.
I'm very, very glad that they made that change to the third sector. Very glad that they made that change. But In terms of, it definitely was no Germany 2019 or any race at Brazil. Pick one. Yeah. But it was okay. I thought it was okay.
It was a pretty run-of-the-mill standard European season F1 race, I felt. And it was but it was good. It was good to see the cars on track and the rest of the races for the rest of the season. I mean, it's pretty much going to be circuits like this. It's the European season. It's going to be road courses versus street circuits. So it's going to be really interesting, and I think this sets a lot of the stage for what is going to happen at the later parts of the season. But we have to first start out talking about the dominance that Max Verstappen showed.
My God.
He scored this weekend, so not only did he Grand Slam the race, which means he won, led every lap, started from pole, and had the fastest lap. So that was his third Grand Slam of his career. Which, to put that in perspective, the great Ayrton Senna has 4. Michael Schumacher has 5. Jim Clark has 8. So Grand Slams are super hard to achieve and super rare, especially in the modern era of Formula One. They're super
I think
rare.
of all the races ever in Formula One, there have only been like 60 Grand Slams.
Yeah, something like that. Charles Leclerc only has 1. It was Australia 2022. So it's just like, it's a super rare achievement. And Lewis Hamilton, I think, has like 6. So that just kind of goes to show you how rare it is.
Yeah, especially when Lewis Hamilton's won 103 times and he only has 6 Grand Slams.
Yeah, it's a very rare occasion, but it's a huge achievement, and there was nobody else even coming close to touching Max Verstappen this weekend. No,
it really is turning into I can't remember if Crofty or Martin Brundle said it at the beginning of the season, but it really just looks like it's Max Verstappen versus everyone in F2.
Yeah, I mean, it was something like Max Verstappen has led so many laps, whatever number of laps this season. The rest of the field combined has led 16 laps this entire season so far.
Yeah.
Like Max Verstappen, I mean, we thought he was dominant last year.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it. I hate to say it because I rate Sergio Perez so high. But
that was not a good race.
Well, I mean, not only that, but I think that Max Verstappen has this championship wrapped up.
Oh yeah.
There's no I do not see anybody catching Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
And it's going beyond, we all said that about Ferrari last year and look what happened. There is nothing that is slowing down Max Verstappen in that Red Bull team.
Yeah. I mean unless all of a sudden unless all of a sudden something happens where the Red Bull car all just becomes super unreliable and they can't finish a race from here to the end of the season, I highly doubt that'll happen, but it's going to take that for anyone else to have a remote shot at winning.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think it's championship wrapped up for Max. Really, it'll be exciting to the midfield, the upper midfield. That'll be exciting because it looks like Ferrari is still going through some growing pains this season. I think that they could pull it out towards the end of the season to get their drivers, third, second or third, and I think they could. I think there's like 3 teams that could get second right now. So it's really going to be the second to like 4th is going to be super, super exciting.
Yeah.
Which I'm really stoked to see how that plays out for the rest of the season. But congrats Red Bull on your what is it, 5th constructor and driver world championship. Good job.
7th driver world champion.
Yep. Congratulations, Red Bull.
So yeah,
you did it.
But I will say, the battle for second place in the Constructors' Championship is going to be tight.
It's going to be fun to watch.
Mercedes, Aston Martin, and Ferrari, I think all have a capability to, maybe less Ferrari if they figure out their strategy problems.
It's been 3 years, and I don't think they ever will.
Unless they figure something out operationally or strategically, they could be in the mix. Aston Martin has been in the mix all season, especially compared to what Fernando Alonso has been able to do here in the early part of the season. And you can always count on Mercedes being in the mix because their car is starting to work and they have 2 really good drivers. But let's get into each team and how they did. So as per usual,
Williams is up first.
Yeah, Williams is up first. So another weekend where they just struggled and could not make an impression.
Yeah.
It was just tough. I mean, Alex Albon didn't do a whole lot. I mean, wasn't able to do a ton. Logan Sargent still just adapting and adjusting, and he, like all of the other rookies, is just driving like a rookie right now, and so that's just kind of the way it is.
And it sucks that he's going through his rookie growing pains in a Williams.
Yeah, it's tough.
The only Williams in recent history that I think has done well their rookie year was George Russell.
Yeah. So, just another tough weekend. I mean, this
I'm giving him a D.
Track. I mean, yeah, I give them a D too. This track is a little bit of a bellwether. So I would be worried if I was Williams about where they're at. And it was interesting coming into this weekend. So there were really 3 teams that we got to see the undersides of their car from Monaco. And it was making its rounds on Twitter a lot how complex the Red Bull and Mercedes floors are. And then how incredibly simple the floor of the Williams is. It's just not producing any downforce. They have a super... they lack any kind of downforce, and that's coming from the underside of their body. And actually, it prompted James Vowles, their team principal, to he probably said this a long time ago, but it was doing its rounds on Twitter after those pictures surfaced about I didn't realize just how far behind everything was, and they're still using incredibly primitive. Software or methods in designing and developing their cars. So that was really shocking to see. So they've got a lot of work ahead of them. Fortunately for them, they have the most, because they're last in the Constructors' Championship starting I think now, they will have the most
wind tunnel time
of anybody else on the grid.
Yeah.
So it all really, and because of the injection from Darlington Capital and Duracell and other companies, they're spending at the budget cap. So they have the ability to do it. They just need to do it wisely. And so there's potential that could really affect their 2024 car.
Yeah, and I hope that they'll at least take those cheeky photos that were taken of the Red Bull and Mercedes, and use that to their advantage. To I don't know how much they're going to be able to change that concept of the floor this year, but maybe bring some upgrades to the floor to add some stuff, because the downforce on these cars, it comes from the floor. It no longer comes from the bits on top pushing the car down. It comes from the floor sucking the car to the track. And so I wonder if they're going to be able to take that and use those images as like, hey, let's come up with an idea for a completely new floor design next year, and let's see what we can add to the floor this year. I really hope they do that. I mean, if I was them, I would do that. I'd be like, let's see what we can do. And James Vowles comes from Mercedes, so that team is in good hands. And like you said, with the money coming in from Darlington and Duracell, I think they're set up for the future, just like with Ferrari.
Yeah, I hope this car is more of a stopgap than a trend. But yeah, just another tough weekend for them, and I think this is going to be the way that they perform this weekend is going to be a little bit more the trend for the season.
Yeah.
But moving on, next is AlphaTauri, and I have to say, I mean, I probably give them a C on the weekend.
Yeah, I give them a C.
But Yuki Tsunoda continues to impress me with his drive.
Oh, yes, 100%.
He continues to impressed. He's consistent. He's making good overtakes. He's doing everything that team needs him. He's no Pierre Gasly pulling them up to, qualifying P4 as a rookie in the Bahrain Grand Prix in 2019. But he's doing, and that team has fallen off significantly from where they were, from their competitive order back in 2019, 2020, when he was competing for points
even
and wins.
2021. Not so much 2021.
But he continues to impress, and I have to say, we can't talk about Yuki Tsunoda without talking about his penalty this weekend, which I do not believe. I believe it was justified if they had penalized other people for doing the same thing, and I do not believe that is the case. And so if we're looking at it like that, I don't know that he should have gotten penalized. And it seems really unfair.
What infuriates me is Max pushed Carlos, squeezed Carlos. Now, granted, Carlos didn't get pushed off the racetrack, so he stayed on the racetrack. But you look at Max, his entire car was over the curbs. Yuki Tsunoda just got his left-hand wheels, tires on the curb like you're supposed to. Max was completely on the other side of the curbs, didn't get penalized, but Yuki Tsunoda did. In my opinion, it makes no sense. I saw a couple of people posting this is what the rule states. Here, this makes sense, but that to me it does not make sense. It's not justified, and that really infuriated me. And honestly, if I was Carlos, I would have been like, you know what, Max, screw it. I'm staying right here. I'm staying with you. And if you hit me and your car gets damaged, this is your fault.
Yeah. Well,
that's what I was thinking. I was infuriated after that.
Yeah. Well,
when Yuki Tsunoda got the penalty.
I think the other thing too is we can talk about whether or not it was justified, but whether or not it is justified, the problem, I think, seems to me is that there's just an inconsistency in the way that some of these rules are being. And you can get away with some things when you are on certain drivers or certain teams or in certain situations, but you can't in other situations if you don't drive for Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari. So it's just all of all penalties are not being created equal right now, and I just think that is a problem, and that to me has been a problem ever since Charlie Whiting passed away, and we haven't had him as race director. And we've had Michael Massey, and now we have Niels Wittich, and so it just doesn't seem like to me. I mean, I always go back to Canada and Austria in 2019 and how the rules were not applied in similar ways, and that was really the first time where I saw an issue with that, and so I think this has been a problem ever since then. But
I totally agree.
It's just frustrating because I don't think Yuki Tsunoda deserved it. It ruined his race.
Yeah,
he could have had a shot at points, but we should focus on that because he is driving incredibly consistent right now,
and he's driving very well.
He's always a threat for points. I think he's a little bit more inconsistent in qualifying, but he more than makes up for it in the race, and he's just having himself a really great season. And if there is a reason that Red Bull drops Sergio Perez, which I don't believe that they will this year because he signed until 2024. But Yuki Tsunoda is building himself a great resume right now, so that if they look for other options after Sergio Perez, Yuki Tsunoda has put himself into the conversation for that Red Bull seat. I truly believe that. I think he's up there in the conversation with people like Daniel Ricciardo, with Lando Norris, who's been tapped to go to Red Bull for a long time. Or Charles Leclerc if he decides to leave Ferrari. I think he's putting himself up into that conversation. So he's just having a great season.
This is our
weekly
cannoli sighting.
Who's sniffing our computer as we speak. But yeah, so AlphaTauri on the weekend, I give them a C. Moving up, Alfa Romeo is next, and I have to. I'm going to give them a B. B minus, but I'm going to give them a B because
very quiet weekend.
They had a really quiet weekend, but Zhou Guanyu had a great qualifying session. I mean, both of them. It was very quiet, but they were slightly overachieving from where I would expect them to be around.
Yeah.
And so Zhou Guanyu had a good little race for himself. He did really well. Qualified P13. Valtteri qualified P15, which is not really where 16th, which is not really where you want to be, but they were in the conversation. I mean, Zhou Guanyu was getting his elbows out. There were points in there. There was a great battle between. It seemed like himself, Zhou Guanyu, Yuki Tsunoda, and a Haas, whether it be Kevin Magnussen or Nico Hülkenberg, were always hooked up in that race, and they were battling it out. And there were some great moves. And so Zhou Guanyu had himself a great little race. He was threatening for points. He did great, and he had himself a great little race. So I give them a B minus.
I would give him probably a C plus B minus for that. I mean, it was better than what I had expected for that team. So
it was good, and I think if they seem like they're getting themselves onto a really good path, and I hope and I think they're going to continue in that trend. We'll see actually what happens, but. It's a great team, and it's Alfa Romeo's last year in the sport. So,
they're going back to Sauber.
They're going back to Sauber next year in preparation for the Audi takeover in 2026. But overall, a good, quiet, anonymous weekend. But when you're driving a car with a Ferrari power unit, a good, quiet, anonymous weekend is honestly a good thing.
Yeah.
So, next, tied with Alfa Romeo in the Constructors' Championship with 8 points, but by virtue of average finishing position, they're ahead is Haas. And it was a really mixed weekend for them because qualifying was great, but the race, I mean, we see this all the time. I mean, we see this all the time with Haas and Ferrari. Is they're so good in qualifying and they just cannot keep that up in the race. So I'm going to give them a C minus because Nico Hülkenberg would put himself in a great position, threatening for points. Kevin Magnussen had a really tough weekend, but I'm going to give them a C minus. They were around trying to threaten for points. It wasn't always probably going to go their way. But again, it seemed like that they were always in the mix with something. I just wish it was actually for points and not for 12th, 13th, 14th. They were actually fighting for points. Like I think that team truly is capable.
I agree.
So up next we have McLaren in P6.
I'm giving them a C minus.
I was tempted to give them a D plus, but I'm going to go C minus.
I'm going to go C minus strictly because they qualified so well.
They Lando Norris
P3,
just an incredible qualifying.
And again, much like Haas, qualified really, really well. Just did not go anywhere.
Of course, I will say
both drivers out of the points by the end of the race.
The redeeming thing is that Lando Norris's was not done on his own. He could have done more to avoid contact with Hamilton on the last lap, but you had, because Max Verstappen squeezed out Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz had to check up. Hamilton had to check up. And that just meant that by the time that Norris was even able to react to all of those drivers checking up, he was without a front wing. So I'm not entirely convinced that was 100% avoidable or his fault. It's just something that made his race a little bit harder. So I give McLaren a little bit more grace for that. But we have to talk about how good Lando Norris did in qualifying.
I never thought that he would be able to put his car third. It was a miracle that they got through to Q3.
And again, I've said it several times already. And if Spain truly is the bellwether that we say that it is, that could bode well for McLaren in later races during the summer European season. I will say it was made harder because they did get some rain overnight. So on qualifying and race day, the track was a little bit greener. It was a little bit cooler. There was a high amount of tire degradation. So that played a huge part in teams like McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferrari not having good weekends was just the super increased tire degradation.
Yep.
So I'm a little bit more gracious with them, but I'll probably give them a C+.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Up next is Alpine, and both drivers finished in the top 10. Both drivers finished in the points.
Yeah, and they
Pierre
actually
finished, or Esteban finished in 8th, and Pierre finished in 10th. I'm going to give them a B+ on the weekend, B+, A- on the weekend.
I'm going to give them a B+.
It was a very good weekend for them.
I think this was a weekend where they almost could have taken advantage of Aston Martin, given how off the pace Aston Martin looked in the race. So I think they lose out a little bit.
Yeah.
But, any team that comes home with any midfield team that comes home with a double points finish is going to be good news, especially on a weekend where Charles Leclerc didn't get any points, where Sergio Perez couldn't get up onto the podium.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of out of position, stuff up and down the grid. So I think they did their best to capitalize. I think they left a little bit on the table. I would have liked to have seen them capitalize on Aston Martin, but all in all, a solid, reliable weekend.
I'm starting to become a little bit of an Alpine fan this year.
I am too, and it's becoming more and more of a trend, which just makes Laurent Rossi's comments after the Australian Grand Prix that much more confusing. When he was
remind me what he said.
This team is. It's amateurs. We're not operating.
It was
that whole thing, that the statement.
It was very aggressive.
And then had a great weekend in Baku. They've had a great weekend in Monaco. Then now they have another great weekend here in Spain. And I think they're trending upwards. They're probably not where they're definitely not where they predicted they would be 3, 4, 5 years ago. They would like to be higher, I'm guessing, especially considering the leap that Aston Martin took this off season. But they're doing okay. So it just makes Laurent Rossi's comments really confusing. I'm always wondering, if going back to that, if that was just something to kind of kick the team into gear.
Maybe it was. Maybe it was.
The only people that truly know are Alpine personnel and Laurent Rossi himself.
Yeah.
So maybe we should ask him. But
Laurent Rossi, answer our question.
Yeah. Hey, in case you're watching this, we have some questions for you.
Doubt he's ever going to see this.
But anyway, so just all in all, another just solid weekend of production for them.
They're having themselves a season.
They were scrapping it out. They were doing well. So that's Alpine. Moving up next, once again in 4th place is Ferrari and
D.
Oh, I don't know.
D-.
Let's take it a driver at a time because each driver had very, very different reasons why they struggled. So let's start with Carlos Sainz because there was some positive.
Yeah.
He didn't do as well in the race.
Finished 5th.
Ended up finishing 5th after starting P3rd. But, Perez was always going to be up there. Mercedes looked much quicker this weekend.
Yes.
And the Ferrari is trending in the way of they're incredibly fast over one lap and their qualifying pace flatters them. So they were always going to fall back from there. But Carlos Sainz actually said he was happy with the balance of the car, and he said it felt a little bit more stable. Gave me the impression that the upgrades were moving in the right direction, and Fred Vasseur admitted, and I still believe that it's not enough. But seemed like that they were moving, especially considering where Mercedes ended up this weekend.
They're going the right way.
They're going the right way, but it's still not enough. But Carlos Sainz was happier with how the car was behaving over a stint.
Yeah.
Now, the car is still incredibly unpredictable, even stint to stint, within a Grand Prix distance.
Yeah, because, and even Charles hinted at that too, saying that for one driver, the hards looked really good. Then Charles put on the hard tires and horrible tire.
Yeah, well, but in 2 different stints with the same compound of tire, the car reacts completely differently. So it's just really interesting. But I think, and the reason why I kind of wanted to separate talking about each driver, because let's talk about Charles now. that his performance, I'm still not convinced. I mean, qualifying, we obviously know that there was something wrong with that Ferrari. They stripped it down, which meant he's had to start it in the pit lane. But I'm not convinced that they found what that issue was, because he made no impression in that race at all. And there were teams that he finished below that he should have passed. Like, he should have been ahead of the Alpines. He should have been ahead of the Alfa Romeos, the Haases. There are teams where he just should have finished ahead of them.
Yeah.
He should have finished ahead of the Alpine. I mean, Zhou Guanyu finished 9th with getting points. That's another driver that, Zhou Guanyu drove really well, and no disrespect to him, but Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari should have been ahead.
In the Ferrari Works car.
And he just wasn't. And so I'm not entirely convinced that they actually found what that issue is. And they're probably not going to make a statement. They're going to deal with that internally, and they might even change his chassis. But that's not to say that that's an excuse, because that stuff, they should be able to know where those things are and find where those issues are. And, just all in all, a tough weekend. And the upgrades didn't quite deliver what they needed to. But Carlos had a little bit of a happy spot. So I'm going to give them a C- compared to giving them a D or a D+. I still give them a C-. Just because it seems like they're starting to move in the right direction. But even teams that are just now starting to move in the right direction are a year and a half behind Red Bull.
Yep.
And they're going to stay that way because Red Bull is evolving all the time just as fast.
If not faster.
Yeah. So really tough weekend for Ferrari, you have to say. I think the strategy of Leclerc starting on hards and then pitting after 17 laps was, I know I'm not a strategy. I'm not trying to pretend I'm a strategist, but that was so dumb.
Yeah, I don't know. I posted this on Twitter and I said, let me pull up my actual tweet so that way you can know exactly what I said, so I'm not misquoting myself. I was very furious after the race. What did I say? Oh, wait, no. What did I say? Where was it? Oh, I have a bachelor's degree in music education, and I can do strategy better than Ferrari. That's what I said.
Yeah, it's just.
And you know what? I'm kind of sticking to it.
Yeah, those tires should have at least gone to lap 30. 32, I think, was the window for hard tires.
Yeah.
So why he came on lap 17 halfway through his stint.
Yeah.
Now, he was struggling on that tire, but he put hard tires later on at the end of the race, and they worked fine. So again, that's just another inconsistency where that car is behaving differently on the same tire compound in a race distance. So I don't know, man, but that was a really weird strategy call. And especially, I mean, I know they were probably waiting for a safety car, but they should have at least give it another 10, 15 laps and let a really substantial gap build so you're not losing out on, and, you're pitting from 9th and you fell back to 18th.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But it was just not smart.
Yeah.
But anyway, I could talk about how Ferrari is not smart all the time. Moving on, and for the first time all season, we're talking about this team in the 3rd place slot compared to the 2nd place slot, Aston Martin. And we're talking about them in 3rd place, as we alluded to earlier. They just had an off weekend.
Yeah.
They struggled with tires. They didn't.
Yeah. Even still, I mean, they finished, 5th and 6th in the race. I'm still going to give them at least a C+.
I'm still willing to give them a B because Lance Stroll had a much better weekend than the past couple races he's had.
He did. Yeah. And he finished ahead of Fernando
Alonso. Fernando Alonso played the team game, which is surprising to see from Fernando Alonso, but I think he's learning his place, that the owner of his team is his teammate's son or his teammate's father. So, it just kind of playing a little bit of the politics a little bit in there by, his radio message towards the end of the Grand Prix saying, tell Lance not to worry. We're going for the team result. I'm not going to push him. Let him do his thing. But, even still, Lance had a much improved weekend this weekend. And so, they were a little bit off the pace. Should they have, and this is also a double-edged sword too, because we've come to expect a podium from Fernando Alonso, and we've come to expect him to be up there. So when we say, "Oh man, they had a really off weekend," 5th and 6th for that team is still pretty good.
Yeah, so I'll give him a C+. I don't think I'm ready to give him a B just yet, but I'll give him a C+. Yeah, give him a C+.
But all in all, good weekend, and it's so good to see both cars up there. But they've put themselves in this position because Lance Stroll has had a couple really hard weekends. Yeah. So hopefully this sort of more consistent performance is regular for Lance. He's coming off of a really strong weekend. The next race is his home race in Canada. So I think there's potential for him to, if there is a race for him to be in the top 5 or maybe even threatening for a podium, I would love to see Lance do it at his home Grand Prix.
Yeah, I agree. Up next, in second place, is Mercedes.
I'm giving them an A.
Giving them an A, too?
That was a fabulous weekend from them.
I'd even give them an A+. Shoot.
It was great. For where
no one was going to beat Max, so the fact that they finished second and third.
Yep. It was, no one was going to beat Max. They finished second and third.
Ferrari, take notes. That's how you do upgrades.
Yeah, for real. Oh, my God. Yeah, the Mercedes upgrades. Granted, George Russell did say that it's not all the side pods. A lot of what happened, a lot of the upgrades happened underneath the car, particularly probably with the floor, because their upgrades in Monaco looked really good. And even I think both some of the Mercedes and the Red Bull guys said, Max even made a joke about slapping the Red Bulls, with 0 side pods. Side pods don't do a whole lot. It's how you utilize the package. And I just think that car's package is just better with side pods. You can create a really good package with no side pods. And I just don't think that they really did it or understood what that was happening. But whatever they did, it worked. And they need to do that all the time. I was super mega impressed with Lewis Hamilton, or with Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton back on the podium finally. Yeah. It was great, and I have to say, great drive from George Russell too.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been in the past very critical of Mercedes, and I'm not at all a fan of Mercedes. Never have been. Don't think I ever will be. But it's still really, really good to see a team that has historically been so dominant, especially in very recent history, in the turbo hybrid era. They've been absolutely dominant, and to see them be absolutely nowhere last year and then come back after an abysmal start to the season, looking like it was going to be even worse than last year. They did so well, and it's so nice to see. As much as I don't like Mercedes, it's good to have them.
Feels normal.
It feels normal.
It feels like
I was trying to find the right words for it, and you hit the nail on the head. It feels normal.
Just feels normal. It feels like. Yeah, I mean, it just feels normal. At this point, it feels like we're getting back to some sense of normalcy with them, and it's really good. And I have to say, speaking of Mercedes and George Russell, the meme of the weekend had to be George Russell. I think it's raining in turn 5, like 10 laps later. Yeah, it's just sweat. Is anybody else reporting rain? It's like nobody else is reporting rain. It's just you. It was literally the sweat.
It reminded me of that Daniel Ricciardo quote after Singapore. It was like, no, I'm a high performance athlete. This is real sweat.
Athlete sweat. Kiki. Yeah, that was playing.
I immediately thought of Daniel Ricciardo there.
George Russell, you sweet boy.
He's the golden retriever of the grid.
Yes, and once again, nobody catching them at this point.
Red Bull.
In the P1 slot, Red Bull, but I have to say,
I give him a B-.
B- weekend.
Yeah.
And
it's coupled with the fact, Max Verstappen absolutely dominated. He was first in literally every single practice session, every single qualifying session. Grand Slam, amazing. If Sergio Perez had finished second, I would have given him an A+. But Sergio Perez out in Q2, qualified 11th. And he got up to 4th, which is a great drive from him.
Yeah.
But he should have been able to pass the two Mercedes cars.
He didn't make an impression early enough in the race. So by the time he got to where he could be competitive, he was already a pit stop cycle behind Max.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of the status of where Formula One is right now as a sport. But yeah, I mean, and even though yes, he climbed up to 4th. When Max is having as dominant as a weekend as he is, you at least have to be, even if it's like, some of Valtteri Bottas's P2s where they're 30 seconds behind Hamilton, you still finish P2. And you got to be doing that when you have a Red Bull like that. And when nobody else is even close to Red Bull's performance, you need to be up there, qualifying and the race. So, and Sergio Perez is not known for his qualifying. He's not a good qualifier. It's not been a strength of his. His strength is driving in the wet and tire conservation, but qualifying is not one of his strengths. But when you have a car like that, you need to figure out how to make it one of your strengths.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it just kind of is what it is. So I give them a B-. Definitely a great weekend,
B-,
but not a perfect weekend, which they ideally they should be having.
Yeah.
When you're looking
McLaren
like your Mercedes in 2019 and 2020,
McLaren 88,
McLaren
Ferrari
88.
2000, any of the 2000s.
Yeah, McLaren, especially like 2002, 2004. You're finishing 1-2 every race. That's just kind of the way that it needs to be. So unfortunate for Sergio Perez, but that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah. Yep.
So that goes through all of our teams. For the season for the race and what we rate them. Now we are getting into who our top performers of the weekend are, and we'll start with you. Who's your top performer of the weekend?
Someone I haven't actually said all season long yet, but I'm giving it to Max. I mean, first in literally every single session, the entire weekend, Grand Slam. He spent the entire weekend in first place. How can you it's just absolutely amazing. Weekend from him. So, yeah, Max.
I have to give it to 2. And this is actually the person that I voted for driver of the day that I think should have gotten driver of the day, and that is George Russell. Coming from P12, which is actually, honestly, probably where I would have expected Mercedes. But to come all the way from there to on the podium, finishing 3rd behind your teammate, ahead of Sergio Perez, who started ahead of you. Granted, his race was made easier by having a stellar first lap, making up 6 places in 1 lap.
Yeah,
that was a great first lap, but a great drive, calculated drive, and he looks like he is just betting into that team so super well, and. Yeah, just a great drive from him. If I had to pick a number 2, I'm going to give it to Zhou Guan Yu. Finishing P9 in Alfa Romeo, bagging some points for the team. Some essential points that could be crucial in the Constructors' Championship, considering they're tied with Haas right now, and they're only 9 points behind McLaren. So that, I think, could prove crucial later in the season. So... Yeah. Great drive from him. He's starting to look much more consistent, and this was all in all. He just drove a great race this weekend, and I think he should be super happy with how he performed.
Yeah, those are great, and I totally agree. Well, that is it for episode this week. Next week, or not next week, but the next episode is for the Canadian Grand Prix. Chris will not be in the episode. It's going to be me, and my girlfriend Laura is going to join us on that episode.
Which is going to be really fun, and you should check it out because she
doesn't know anything
about Formula One. So this podcast is going to be really awesome.
Yeah.
She's super cool.
Very funny.
Very funny. She's great. And I think she's going to give a really awesome and fresh perspective about Formula One. Much better than we can as fans since like 2004, 5, 6.
Yeah. But also, what's exciting. By the time the Canadian Grand Prix wraps up, this man will be married. Yeah, he's going to be married. In fact, where the ceremony for your wedding
starts at the exact same time as qualifying.
Which I'm only holding that against you a little bit. Only a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I thought it would be fun to watch with all the groomsmen watch qualifying as we're getting ready. But that's okay. It's going to be really, really exciting. So it'll be...
Yeah, I'll be a little bit busy.
Yeah, he'll be busy on his honeymoon. And
but I'll watch the race. I'll still watch the race. I'm going to try to anyway.
Yeah. You may have other important things to
I might have other important things to deal with, but I'm going to try to watch the race.
Yeah, and it's going to be a fun episode. I'm really excited for it. I know Laura is very nervous.
And
she's like, oh, God, what if I say something wrong? I'm like,
she's going to...
You're not going to say anything
There is
wrong.
no expectation, and if you're a fan watching this, don't gatekeep this stuff.
Yeah, be nice to her.
It's really rude.
Yeah, be nice to her.
Well, just be nice in general. But be nice to her. But be nice in general.
Yeah.
Don't gatekeep Formula One. This is how people learn about the sport. Formula One is for everybody. Yeah. Formula One should be for everybody. And
anyone can cook.
Yes. Oh man, now I want pasta. Anyway, we are devolving into some. We're
rebranding to a Disney.
Yeah,
Disney podcast.
Yeah, it's gonna be us and cooking.
Anyway,
we're gonna stop now before we say anything stupid.
Right, so be sure to like and subscribe. It'll be a fun episode next week. Like us on social media, follow us, all this stuff.
You'll not see me next week. You'll see James next week. I will see you all back again. I don't even know what's after Canada. I've been so focused on the... Are we having a French Grand Prix this year?
I think so.
Hold on.
Did they cancel it?
It'll be the Austrian Grand Prix.
They did cancel France.
July. So I will see you July 2nd.
Huh.
Austrian Grand Prix.
Yes.
That is the next time that you all will see me.
You'll see him. That'll be a solo episode for Chris because I'll be in Minnesota. But
great. Anyway.
Anyway.
Off we go. See you next time.